Hey kids, welcome to my kitchen, and great timing. Next week we'll be over at the church's kitchen, and I'll be helping you discover how to cook and bake and hopefully make food taste good. So what's one thing that we use in almost all our recipes to help make food taste good? Salt. But how do we use salt? Well, we don't take a big spoonful of it because that would taste gross. Even if we take just a little pinch and taste that, well, that doesn't taste too good either. So, how do we use salt? Some people take a salt shaker at the dinner table and they'll shake out some salt on their plate and it'll make their food taste better. But chefs use salt in many different ways. They use it with fish and chicken and meat, and they'll put salt on it and they'll use other seasonings, but the salt has a main purpose, and the purpose is to make that meat taste better and also to keep the juices in, which makes the meat juicy and tender when they're done. In olden times, or in biblical times, they didn't have refrigerators and they didn't have ice. So they had to keep their meat fresh somehow. They put salt all over it and rubbed it, and that was called curing it. It dried it out and it kept it fresh for longer, so they didn't waste. But we don't only use salt in meat. We also use salt in baking, in cakes, in cookies, in scones, in pies. You wouldn't think that. We usually think of those things as sweet. So why do we add salt? Because when the salt mixes with everything else, it just makes things taste better. Jesus talked about salt, and Matthew, one of the apostles, wrote down what Jesus said. And let me read it to you because I want to get it right. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. What do you think Jesus was trying to tell us? We are the salt of the earth? What does that mean to you? To me, it means that God has given us certain talents. And I think Jesus was trying to tell us to use those talents to go out into the world and work with others to make a better world. Just like salt is used together with other ingredients to make things taste better. And then Jesus says, but when salt loses its saltiness, it's no good anymore. How does salt lose its saltiness? I suppose if it gets too old, it doesn't taste salty anymore. If you leave salt out in the open air, it can suck in all the moisture and it'll get clumpy and you can't really use it anymore. Maybe what Jesus is saying is when we stop using our talents the way we are supposed to for God, that we might not be as good anymore, that we won't help things get better. And we don't want to get trampled underfoot. Now, in biblical times, again, when people built two-story homes, on the second floor they had to put down a floor. And they would put plaster down on the floor to make it strong for people to stand on, but even just plain plaster wasn't enough. People would still crack the floors. So what they did was they took salt and they mixed it with the plaster and they made a stronger floor. So salt was still good for use when it was to be trampled underfoot, but it couldn't be used for the food anymore, so maybe it didn't make the world quite as good. It made the house better, but not the whole world. So, always use salt in your food and use it in the right proportion. And when you do, your food will taste better. And always use your God-given talents together with those in the rest of the world. And if you do, you can be sure that you will be helping to make a better world, the world that God wants us to live in. Have a great week.